Good day. My name is Daan Dousi. I'm working in the section dealing with rulemaking activities related to pilot training and flight simulation training devices. And today I'm here to present to you an update and insight into the work on the so-called FCS concept. It's the FSTD capability signature concept that was conceived more or less in 2018. The concept that aims to shift a long-standing paradigm and open up new possibilities in training and ensure innovations are taken on board in a more expeditious way. So some background on the FCS concept. The existing paradigm for using flight simulation training devices is in use since 1990s, following very much a tool-to-task approach, basically meaning that we have a device and we just see what we can do with it in terms of training. The focus is very much on full flight simulators, which are traditionally of high fidelity level, but at the same time very costly. Then the other items are the availability and accessibility are often restricted to the full flight simulators, and we've seen now with the pandemic that in terms of travel restrictions, and using your own instructors at the same time is problematic. The regulatory framework that is in place on the use of especially other training devices is relatively prescriptive today, but with this paradigm it should be evolving into a more flexible direction. At the same time today we see that the FSTD capabilities are not standardized. If we look, for example, at if we have two flight training devices, then the capabilities could be different between them without seeing that at a first glance. So that is problematic and requires standardization. And the other last point is, of course, about the innovations that we're seeing, ever increasing and faster needs for regulatory change, knowing that rulemaking generally takes 3 to 5 years to complete, which is obviously not matching the pace of innovation. So this was the slide showing you a little bit about the focus that has been very much on the full flight sim level D in this case. You see there's some use of lower level devices or the flight training device levels, the FMPTs. But first and foremost, the focus has been on full flight simulator levels since the 1990s, and we're talking about a percentage of 77% of the qualified devices out there. So what is FCS? What is it trying to achieve? So what do we need to achieve? Training needs to drive the FSTD capabilities needed. We need to have a better fit between the training task, training objective, and the device used. And we should be able to distinguish between training and training to proficiency. At the same time, the FSTD capabilities should be clarified and standardized. And we should make more use of the FSTD special conditions, which I'll touch upon later on in the presentation. And with all this, we would also enable training providers to reshape typical training footprints with less full flight simulators and more other training devices. So on this slide you can see the existing situation today. We have on the left-hand side the qualification certificate, the QC, and on the right-hand side we have an excerpt of the which is currently at the rule level in the flight crew licensing requirements, is the training tasks, and at the top you can see that you can either use an FSTD or an airplane for some of the tasks. So the link between these two is not very clear, and because of that, this is the reason why one tends to select full flight simulators to complete these training tasks, and hence we end up with the situation of 77% of the simulators being full flight simulators. So with the FCS concept we will try to address this situation. So what will be the benefits? Once the new framework is in place, we will have a more permeable regulation that will enable new innovative technologies faster. It will have a more standardized approach to the FSTD capabilities, more cost-effective and sustainable training footprints, more training opportunities for students, also closer to home, and greater availability and accessibility of FSTDs primarily within Europe. So the FCS proposal, you can also compare the FCS to the DNA. In this case, we are developing training matrices to support our authorities and the training providers, also thereby distinguishing between training and training to proficiency. And as you can see, the smaller excerpt there is a sample of a training matrix. And then also we're looking at the FSTD qualification certificate to review and amend it to actually show the actual FCS of the particular device. And of course that's the larger excerpt. So to give you a concrete example, if you look at the training matrix there on the right hand side, on the vertical axis it talks about, it lists the tasks, and on the horizontal axis it talks about the specific features, 12 to 13 features that a simulator could have. And then inside the matrix it then distinguishes between, as I said, training and training to proficiency, but also between whether for that particular feature and that task you need to have a specific data set, a representative or a generic data set, or you don't need any data there. So in that sense, if you then have the task and you can list all the different needs of the features for that particular task, you will end up with a particular FCS that you can then match with the qualification certificate. And that will then enable training providers to develop a training footprint by matching the training tasks and then also the available simulators that they have or they can find on the market. And as per regulation, the training provider then needs to demonstrate to the authority on how the FSTDs that they have put forward as part of the training footprint achieve the training objectives that are required. So bringing that all together, just to recap, as you can see on the slide, we have at the top the FSTD qualification certificate, which has now this FCS with the features 1 to 13 there listed vertically, and then the associated DNA FCS on the right-hand side. This is then matched with the training matrix, with the tasks as I explained on the previous slide. And those two together then are evaluated by the training provider to see if the training objectives can be achieved adequately with the FSTDs. And once that evaluation is done, as per regulation today, the training provider then has to show to their authority how their training footprint meets the regulatory requirements. Then a little bit about the use of FSTD special conditions. I mentioned it in one of the previous slides that there is a need to keep up with the new innovations, and we believe that the use of special conditions is key to that. As we have seen on the aircraft certification side, they have also applied special conditions, and we are doing the same, but then for flight simulation training devices, which will help us to enable new innovative technologies for existing FSTDs, such as the introduction of virtual reality and augmented reality in traditional simulators, and as well to enable special conditions for new aircraft to help develop FSTDs for new aircraft, such as VTOL aircraft, for example. So how does it work, a special condition for FSTDs then? The main steps are that a training needs analysis needs to be made, and the good thing here is that the FCS concept is also very usable for this purpose. And from this training needs analysis and the FCS concept, the aircraft manufacturer can then determine its flight data needs that will then feed the simulator development. A gap analysis needs to be made between the existing CSs. For example, today we have the CS for airplanes and one for helicopters. And then based on that gap analysis and based on any additional needs above and beyond the CSs, the special conditions can be developed. So what is the process? So first, of course, we need to identify a need to adapt the special condition. And the process is that the applicant, normally an aircraft manufacturer, applies for it, and then the competent authority, either being an NEA or EASA, then validates and publishes the special condition for use by the particular applicant, but also for use by others to develop the same simulators. And of course, over time, we will see more and more special conditions, and then every so often we will be able to then update the regulation, the CS FSTD, with the special conditions in longer time frames. So how long do we have to wait for the FCS? So we have developed a roadmap to FCS implementation, and here you can see a little bit about the timeline. You can see that the development phase 1 is currently ongoing, and there's several aspects to the development. It concerns amendments to high-level implementing requirements, but also, of course, changes to the existing certification specification for FSTDs, as well as all the associated acceptable means of compliance, including the matrix, as I talked about already. So this process is likely to take up to 2 years from now. And then after that phase, we'll have another phase where we need to implement, of course, and this will take time because we need to support and train the stakeholders that are involved in this process, which is on the NEA side, it's the NEA inspectors dealing with FSTDs, but also those dealing with the approval of training courses. And on the other side, we have the industry where we have the FSTD operators as well as the training organizations. And in parallel to this roadmap, you can see we are continuously developing special conditions, and as I said before, at any point in time when we have an update to the CS, we will try to incorporate those special conditions. So whereas today we have a focus on full flight simulators, and we just see, okay, what can we do with them? Hopefully by 2025, we will look first at what is the training needs, and then to determine, okay, what devices are out there that can be used. Thank you for your attention.